My sister has been calling her my daughter for 11 months. She picked the name on a Tuesday in October, texted it to me at 11 at night with 3 exclamation points and a string of heart emojis. She painted the nursery yellow, not the aggressive yellow of a kitchen, but a pale, early morning yellow, the color of light before anyone else is awake. She put a stuffed rabbit on the changing table. A stack of board books with broken spines because she'd been reading them aloud to no one for months, getting her voice ready. I work as a licensed child welfare caseworker in the county adoption division. 7 years. I know what legitimate adoption paperwork looks like the way a carpenter knows a square corner by feel, not by thought, but by repetition until the knowledge lives in the hands. I know the formatting of accreditation codes. I know which Hague Convention-approved facilitators operate in which countries and which state licensing boards oversee them. It's not a skill I carry consciously. It just runs quietly in the background, like any tool you've used long enough. When my sister pressed the adoption match photo into my hands that Saturday evening at her send-off dinner, her face was the most unguarded thing I'd ever seen. She was 34 years old. She'd been trying to become a mother for 3 of those years. 2 failed fertility treatments. 1 agency that had been pausing new placements due to policy changes for 14 months before going entirely silent after taking a deposit. She had earned every bit of that joy, worn hard and paid for in full. "Isn't she perfect?" she whispered. I looked at the photo. A baby girl, around 10 months old, round-cheeked, with a serious expression, the expression of someone deciding whether to trust the camera. My sister had named her Ruby. She had monogrammed a blanket. She had a stuffed elephant waiting on the dresser to go with the rabbit. I looked at the photo, and then my eye dropped to the corner of the document underneath it, the agency letterhead she'd carried to the party in a clear folder, because she wanted everyone to see it was real. It was happening. It was finally real. The agency name printed at the top read, Sunrise Promise International. My stomach moved in a way that had nothing to do with nerves. The send-off dinner had been my sister Becca's idea, and nobody tried to talk her out of it. She'd been planning it for weeks, the same backyard where our parents had hosted every significant occasion since we were kids, the string lights. Our father always stapled along the fence for celebrations, the folding tables covered in vinyl tablecloths from the dollar store that somehow always looked cheerful. My mother had made a sheet cake that said, Bon Voyage, Becca, and Lawson's blue frosting with small airplanes piped in the corners. Lawson was at the grill, because Lawson is always at the grill. Spatula in one hand, a bottle of sparkling water in the other, his face wearing that particular expression of contentment that makes people instinctively trust him. Becca's 2 best friends from college were crammed onto the porch swing, passing a phone back and forth to document everything. My mother circled the table, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting, because that's how she shows love. My father stood near the lemon tree doing what he always does at gatherings, being quietly present, contributing warmth simply by existing in the space. They were flying out at 6 in the morning. 6 a.m. Sunday. They'd pick up Ruby on Monday. Becca had told me once, months ago, in a voice that barely held itself together, that she kept thinking about Tuesday. Getting through Monday and waking up on Tuesday with a baby in the room. She'd been imagining that Tuesday for 11 months. I stood near the back fence with the folder in my hands and tried to slow my breathing. Sunrise Promise International. 3 weeks earlier, that name had appeared in a licensing alert memo that came through our department's shared inbox, a routine distribution from the state licensing board. The subject line had read, Preliminary Investigation, Notice, Sunrise Promise International. Voluntary License Review Pending. I'd forwarded it to my supervisor with a 1-line note and gone back to my own caseload. Licensing reviews weren't unusual. Agencies got flagged for documentation gaps, staffing ratios, administrative delays, 100 things that didn't mean criminal fraud. I was working very hard, standing in my sister's backyard, to remember that. I looked again at the accreditation block on the document. In every legitimate international adoption file I have ever processed, the accrediting body code follows a specific format. 2 letters, a dash, 6 digits. It's standardized because standardization is how oversight functions. Every Hague Convention-approved facilitator operating in this state uses the same structure. It's the kind of thing most people never look at. I look at it every day. The code on my sister's document read IAL-28B. I had never seen that format in 7 years. It didn't correspond to any accrediting body I'd encountered. It didn't follow the internal logic of any regulatory system I could construct. I stood in the warm September evening, with the string lights buzzing softly overhead, and Becca's laughter carrying from across the yard, and I turned the page over one more time, hoping I was missing something. I was not missing anything. "You're quiet over there." Lawson appeared beside me, spatula traded for a bottle of water. He was grinning. "You doing okay?" "I'm great," I said. I handed the folder back and smiled. "She looks like Becca, you know, same little frown line." He looked at the photo and his whole face went soft. "That's exactly what I said the first time I saw it." He laughed quietly. "Keep her company? I gotta check the burgers." I watched him cross the yard. I watched my sister turn toward him as he approached, the way she always turns toward Lawson in any room. Like he's a fixed point and she's found north. I needed to get him alone. It took 20 minutes to find the moment. Becca went inside to help my mother cut the cake, and I touched Lawson's elbow and said, low and even, "Come inside for a second. I need to show you something." He followed without asking why. In the kitchen, I set the document on the counter between us and I pointed to the agency name. I told him, briefly, about the memo. I showed him the accreditation block and explained what was wrong with it. I watched his face move through confusion, then concentration, then something he was working very hard to keep off his face entirely. "Tell me I'm wrong," I said. "I want to be wrong." "What are the chances it's a documentation error on their end?" he asked. His voice was steady, which told me he was using everything he had to keep it that way. "I don't know yet. That's why I need to make some calls." I met his eyes directly. "But Lawson, I need you to not get on that plane tomorrow until I do." He set both hands flat on the counter. He looked out through the kitchen window at Becca, who had come back outside carrying the cake, who was tilting her head back laughing at something my mother said, who was wearing a paper crown her friends had put on her at some point. The party lights made everything golden. "She cannot know tonight," he said very quietly. "Not in front of everyone. Not like this." "I know." "You could be wrong." "I could be. That's what the calls are for." He nodded slowly, the way someone nods when they're keeping themselves from going under. "Okay. What do you need from me?" "Buy me the night," I said. He told Becca his back had flared up. He'd herniated a disc 2 years before, and everyone who loved him had been through a version of that recovery. The particular, careful way he moved, the precise managed pain expression he'd worn for weeks afterward. Becca fussed over him immediately. My mother offered ice. He waved everyone off gently and said he just needed to lie flat. He was so sorry to cut the evening short. They were absolutely still fine for the morning flight. He was convincing because the pain in his face was real. It just had a different source. My sister hugged me at the door. "Call me when the work thing settles, okay?" "I love you," I said. "I love you too." I stood in my parents' driveway and watched her taillights until they turned the corner. Then I called the state licensing board's after-hours compliance line. The woman who answered was professional and unhurried. I gave her the agency name, the registration code, the mailing address from the letterhead. She put me on hold. I sat in the dark and listened to hold music and tried to keep my breathing even. She was gone for 4 minutes. When she came back, her voice carried a quality I recognized, the specific professional calm that develops when someone has learned to deliver serious news without flinching. "That registration number doesn't correspond to any active or inactive accreditation record in our system," she said. The agency name, Sunrise Promise International. We have an active preliminary investigation open on that organization. I'd strongly advise no travel and no further financial transfer until that investigation concludes. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I called Lawson. He picked up on the first ring. I told him what the compliance officer had said. Precise and brief, because I've learned that in these moments, clarity is the only real kindness. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "I'll tell her in the morning. I need to be the one to tell her. Can you be here?" 8 o'clock, I said. I slept in pieces. When I did, it was shallow and fractured, the way sleep goes when you know the morning is going to break something that cannot be put back the way it was. I told Becca at 8:15, sitting across from her on the couch while Lawson held her hand and did not let go. I walked through everything slowly. I showed her the documents. I explained the accreditation format and what it meant. I read her the exact language from the compliance officer. She didn't cry at first. She went very still. Not the stillness of calm, but its opposite. The stillness of a system that has received too much at once. Her eyes moved to the laminated photo on the refrigerator and stayed there. "What about Ruby?" she finally said. "I mean, does she exist? Somewhere? Is she a real baby?" There is no gentle way to answer that question honestly, so I answered it honestly. "We don't know whose photo that is," I said. "The investigators will look into it. But whoever she is, she wasn't placed through any real adoption. There was no legitimate process." Becca looked at the photo for a long time. "I sang to her," she said quietly. "Every night I would hold the photo and sing to her. I was practicing so I'd have the song right when she got here." Her voice broke on the last word. "I wanted to have it ready." That was when she cried. Not briefly, not quietly, but with the full weight of everything she had been carrying. 3 years of trying, 11 months of loving someone who had existed for her completely, in every real sense except the one that mattered. The specific, devastating grief of losing a child who was never real, but was absolutely real to her. Lawson pressed his forehead to hers and stayed. I sat with them until they didn't need me in the room. Then I went to work. Robin Hale ran Sunrise Promise International from a suite in a business park 40 minutes north of the city. Her website was polished, professional photography, a Meet the Team page with headshots, a tab called Our Families populated with smiling couples and babies. When I ran the couples through reverse image search, several returned results from stock photo databases. The testimonials were a mix of fabricated accounts, and I suspected real families strung along with the promise that public silence protected their placement timeline. The state investigator I reached Monday morning had been building a file for 8 months. She needed more families willing to step forward, more documentation, more people with enough courage to put their names on something official when they were already exhausted and ashamed. I spent 2 weeks making phone calls. A couple from our city had paid $42,000 across 18 months. Every time they asked for an update, Robin's assistant sent a new match photo. They'd received 4 different photos over the course of the process. 4 different babies, each one introduced as the real match. They only discovered this when, at my suggestion, they laid all 4 photos side by side. A couple from Ohio had actually boarded a flight to Guatemala City. They waited in a hotel for 4 days. The agency contact number went to voicemail after the 2nd day and stopped accepting messages after the 3rd. They flew home empty-handed and did not tell most people what had happened because there was no language that fit it. A woman named Celia had liquidated her retirement savings to fund the adoption as a single parent. She was 51 and had told almost no one she was doing it because she didn't want to explain if it didn't work out. She apologized for crying through most of our phone call, and I told her she had nothing to apologize for. A pastor and his wife in a small Tennessee town had told their congregation they were adopting. The congregation had thrown a shower. They'd held a dedication service and prayed over an empty car seat. The child never came. 19 families in total, over $600,000 in fees. 4 years of operation. Robin Hale had no licensed social workers on staff, no Hague accreditation, no legitimate children to place, and a practiced fluency in the language of hope that she had used like a precision instrument. The photo of Ruby, the one Becca had laminated and carried and sung to sleep, was traced through the investigation to a family's public social media account in Portugal. The baby in the photo was 18 months old now, healthy, living with her actual parents who had no idea their daughter's image had been stolen. When federal investigators contacted them, the mother asked to speak to my sister directly. I don't know exactly what passed between them in that phone call. Becca told me afterward it helped more than anything else had. Robin Hale was arrested on a Wednesday morning 11 weeks after the send-off dinner. Federal charges, wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft for the use of photographs of real children in the commission of the fraud. Potential sentence, up to 20 years. The investigator texted me, "Hale is in custody. Thought you should know first. Thank you for your work on this." I read it at my desk between 2 other open files and felt something complicated and quiet, not triumph. More like the feeling when a long storm finally stops. Not relief exactly, because the ground is still soaked and the trees are still down, just the absence of the noise. The journalist Una, who'd spent 3 weeks independently verifying every claim with the families willing to go on record, ran the piece the same week as the arrest. It named Robin Hale. It named the specific practices, the rotating baby photos, the fabricated accreditation, the still processing language that bought months of continued patience from families who couldn't afford not to be patient. 19 families, $600,000, 4 years. More families came forward after the piece ran. A civil attorney filed a consolidated suit representing 17 of the victims. When it reached settlement, Robin Hale was ordered to pay restitution she didn't have. She lost the business park suite, the bank accounts, everything she had built on the weight of other people's hope. Becca watched the verdict on her laptop with Lawson beside her. She texted me 2 words, "Thank you." Recovery was not a straight line and nobody pretended otherwise. Becca saw her therapist twice a week through the winter, a woman who specialized in what she called anticipatory grief and expectant parent loss, the grief that accumulates in the space between wanting a child and having that wanting weaponized against you. Most people didn't know this category of loss existed with its own name, its own particular shape. Becca and I both learned to explain it without apologizing for the explanation. In January, she and Lawson took down the nursery together. Deliberately, not in defeat. Clearing space rather than preserving a wound, they packed the board books into a box in the closet. They kept the stuffed rabbit because some things you just keep. In the spring, they began the process again with a Hague-accredited agency. I walked them through the paperwork, line by line, called the licensing board myself, verified the accreditation directly through the Hague Convention's registry, read every document twice. Becca and Lawson didn't find this excessive. They found it necessary. We had all learned something irreversible about the difference between trust and verification. The match came 8 months later. Becca sent me the photo on a Thursday afternoon with no message. I called her 20 seconds after. "I already checked everything," she said before I could speak. There was laughter in her voice, shaky and real. "I called the board myself. I verified the accreditation number." "I know you did." Then she let herself cry. The other kind, relief cracking open into something that was finally allowed to exist. I was at the airport when they came home. Becca walked through the arrivals gate with the baby on her hip. 14 months old, enormous dark eyes. The expression of someone assessing a large and unconvincing situation. He was wearing a navy blue fleece and looking at the terminal's ceiling with a kind of dignified suspicion. Lawson was beside her with a carry-on bag and a grin that looked like it physically hurt to contain. She found me in the crowd and walked straight to me and turned the baby toward me the way you turn something precious toward light. "This is Oren," she said. He looked at me. He considered me with those enormous skeptical eyes for approximately 4 seconds, conducting what appeared to be a formal evaluation. Then he reached out and grabbed my finger. I laughed. I hadn't planned to, it just came out. I looked at my sister, the new steadiness in the way she stood, the knowledge she now carried behind her eyes, the kind of knowing that only comes from surviving something that shouldn't have been survivable. She'd lost something real and irreplaceable. She'd been found by someone who understood precisely how much a person wanting a child will trust, and she had been exploited all the way down to the bone. That wound doesn't vanish. It becomes part of the structure. But she was standing in an airport arrivals hall with a 14-month-old who was now investigating the zipper on my jacket with serious professional focus, and her face was the same open, unguarded thing it had been 11 months ago at the party. Not naive anymore. Something better than naive, chosen, deliberate, knowing the cost and paying it anyway. "You kept your promise," she said. "You didn't let us get on that plane." "I just knew the paperwork," I said. She shook her head. "You knew it was worth fighting for." Oren lost interest in the zipper and turned to study the terminal with the expression of someone composing a thorough report. Becca pressed her lips to the top of his head and closed her eyes for a moment, and the airport noise went on around us. Announcements and rolling luggage and strangers rushing past, and none of it touched the stillness at the center of that second. Some things, when they finally arrive, look nothing like the version you rehearsed. They're smaller and noisier and less symmetrical and completely, irrevocably real. The truth hadn't ended my sister's story. It had cleared the wreckage so the real one could finally begin.